Hello, this tutorial covers editing and creating parts in Qrowd. Parts are software modules that are wired together in Qrowd's visual running editor to perform functionality like the widgets that you see on the webtop. You can access the wiring editor from Qrowd's webtop in two ways. The first is from the catalog by right-clicking on assemblies. The second way is from widget title bar areas using the gear icon. In order to be able to edit parts with Qrowd's visual running editor, you must have a developer account, and you must know JavaScript and XML. To edit parts, click the gear icon. A dialog appears that represents Qrowd's IDE. This first tab is a description of the part, giving the part's name, icon, its placement in the catalog, whether or not it is public or private, and some help text. This portion of the help text is a hyperlink to an assembly that demonstrates using the part. All new parts in the system should have a sample assembly. When I click the help text, this is the link that will appear. The assembly ID should be placed here. You can determine the assembly IDs from the URL in the browser. The definition tab describes how the part appears and behaves in the visual running editor. As you can see here, this map part takes 4 inputs. You can learn more about this XML format from this metadata help button. This shows and describes all the possible tags that define a part within the visual running editor. You can get a preview of the part in the editor from this button. As you can see, these are the 4 inputs the part takes, along with a wire node. The wire node inputs always have a type. This particular one takes XML as its input. There are just a few basic types of input defined within Qrowd, being text, numbers, and XML. What happens in Qrowd is that a literal text comparison is done to determine which nodes can be wired together. You can separate multiple types with a space. For example, parts can have properties. Think of properties as knobs that users can turn to modify behaviors within parts. For this map, they can choose what kind of map mode, colors for the map markers, and the background color for the map markers. It is up to the part designer to choose reasonable knobs for the users to tweak for parts. Most commonly, output parts have a lot of properties. It is unusual for non-visual parts to have any properties at all. You can learn more about the part properties XML format here from this button. This will describe all the tags and the layout of the XML metadata for the part properties. You can also preview the properties from this button here. This is how the properties will appear to the user when the widget is configured. If multiple parts have properties within assembly, they will appear as separate tabs. The implementation tab contains the source code for the part. Parts are written in OpenLASDO. The syntax of OpenLASDO is a combination of XML and JavaScript. You can learn more about OpenLASDO here. All Qrowd parts are derived from a base part. This base part implements common functionality for all Qrowd parts. You can learn more about the base part and the API from this button here. At the top are some general rules that all Qrowd parts must follow. Down below is the source code for the base part. It's recommended that you copy this and print it out and use it as a reference. Qrowd parts can make use of class libraries. As you can see here, this one is including a map part. You can view class libraries here. Qrowd has a number of class libraries already built. You can view the source code for them by clicking on an item. As you can see, this is the source code for the map part. The parts that start with an uppercase Q represent derived classes of OpenLASLO components. These were primarily built in order to implement colorization in the DHTML runtime. Otherwise, they generally function identically to the OpenLASLO base parts that they were derived from. You can modify source code and compile it with the button here. Any errors will be highlighted in the editor. You can also save your own versions of the libraries. From the part source code implementation, there is also a compile button. You can also choose to execute the assembly immediately. This provides for quick iterations of editing and viewing changes in parts. When you're done, you can either save the part as a new copy or overwrite the existing one if you have authorizations. It's beyond the scope of this tutorial to describe everything that's possible with the part language. The best course of action is to look at the parts that are already in Qrowd and to use them as a baseline. That concludes this tutorial.